Ho, 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 heathens! How y'all doing? Today we are going to be discussing why Jesus' birthday is actually celebrated on two distinct days, and how originally his physical birth was never celebrated. Stay tuned to learn more. Ho, 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 ho! While I am a mythicist, even as a Christian, I knew that December 25th couldn't have possibly been Jesus' real birthday. Jesus would have been more likely born at the end of August or beginning to middle of September. This is in part due to the description in Matthew as well as in Luke. Of course, this is all if he was even born at all. Now, there are two possible stories about Jesus' birth, and both are kind of mutually exclusive. The Gospel of Matthew has the Magi being directed by God to go and visit Jesus. Of course, in Matthew, Jesus wasn't residing in a manger. He was actually residing in a nice house on the outskirts of Bethlehem. Now, the only indication that we get as for the time period here is that it was done during the reign of King Herod. This places Jesus' birth at about 4 BCE. And that's actually pretty close to when Herod died. He died somewhere around 5 BCE or 4. Now, in contrast to Luke's account of Jesus' birth, Matthew actually doesn't give a time of year for Jesus' birth. Luke has a bit more complex of a story. For one thing, he's got about a 10-year difference in when Jesus was supposedly born. Now, while Matthew actually has Jesus' birth occurring during the reign of King Herod, we see Luke going about 10 years into the future, placing Jesus' birth during the reign of Quirinius as governor of Syria. Now, for the next point, Luke 2:7 and 8 actually specify that the shepherds were out tending to their flock when an angel appeared to them and told them about Jesus' birth and told them to get their fucking asses over there so that they could see the little shit. Now, in case you guys don't know, usually it's pretty cold in December. Me being in Alabama, this is a foreign concept to me. So, the December nights in Judea were actually pretty cold, and so these shepherds wouldn't have been out in the fields fucking their flock. They would have been seeking shelter to fuck their flock. Now, another point in Luke's story is that he has Mary and Joseph traveling for the census. And this wouldn't have happened in December. You know how earlier I was talking about it being really shitty weather? Well, that plays a factor at this point as well, because Joseph and Mary wouldn't have been traveling at this shitty time of year. Now, there are other indicators present in the Bible that would lead us to believe that Jesus was more likely born at the end of August or beginning of September, namely being the birth of John the Baptist. Now, what do these factors tell us? Well, plainly put, Jesus' actual birth was not important to the first century Christians. For one thing, you have the Gospel of Mark as well as Paul that make no mention of his actual birth, and only do we have later insertions into Matthew and Luke where they try to correct Mark and shit in order to make it seem more magical and pagan. The virgin birth was only added much later in the evolution of Christianity because the Roman state had to figure out a way to get all of these pagans to easily convert into the new state religion of Christianity, which happened in about the 4th century. You know, the time when that whole Council of Nicaea thing happened and they codified, the Bible. But there is one particular thing that Christians originally celebrated about Jesus around this time of year. That's what's called the Epiphany. You might be wondering what the fuck that is. Now, the Epiphany is a part of the whole concept of adoptionism. The whole idea that Jesus was adopted as the Son of God, which actually falls in line with a lot of the Jewish concepts of the Son of God. Being that the kings of the Jews were regularly anointed and crowned as sons of God. They were adopted into God's family. So the Epiphany is this particular event when the Messiah, this pre-existent figure that lives up in heaven with God, inserts itself deep inside of Jesus' body. Now, as we know, this happened when Jesus was being dunked in the water by John. A dove or a bright light or whatever the fuck you want to call the Messiah figure coming down to inhabit him happened as he was rising out of the water after he was cleansed. Typically, this is said to have happened on January 6th. And that is originally what was celebrated. Primarily because the first Christians were actually Jewish Christians who held to a lot of Jewish lore and Jewish dogma, so of course they wouldn't have adopted a pagan version of Jesus' birth. They would have been more inclined to celebrate when the Messiah inhabited the body of the person that we now call Jesus. Of course, this does coincide with the celebration of another god that was popular in that area. Ion, the Lord of Infinite Time. To the original first century Christians, Jesus wasn't considered special or the Messiah until this epiphany happens. As I stated before, a lot of what we know about Jesus now was actually codified in the 4th century at the Council of Nicaea. Namely, December 25th being his birthday. But I don't know if you know, but Hippolytus was actually the first one to coin this date as Jesus' birthday in the 3rd century. But it wasn't popular until the Council of Nicaea, because that's when all the good shit goes down. Jesus' birth just wasn't seen as miraculous until the First Council of Nicaea. Of course, as we've already mentioned, December 25th was chosen because of the pagan traditions surrounding December 25th. And there's actual other historical evidence to support the idea that they were trying to steal the pagan traditions. Because they already did it once before on the Samhain. You know, they took that over for All Saints' Day because they wanted to easily convert the pagans into their new religion. For that one, they even moved All Saints' Day from like fucking way back in May all the way to November. Now, I know what you're thinking. Were there contemporary Christians that stated any of this bullshit you're talking about there, GE? Why, yes, other version of GE, there were. In Justin Martyr's dialogue with Trypho, he actually remarks on the fact that most Christians at the time didn't consider Jesus' birth to be of miraculous origin, to be a virgin birth. They felt that it was too pagan in origin, and they highly rejected the story. It is quite true that some people of our kind acknowledge him to be Christ, but at the same time declare him to have been a man of men. I, however, cannot agree with them and will not do so, even if the majority of Christians insist on this opinion. Now, all of this was happening at around 150 to 165 CE. This makes a lot of sense, though, because of the Jewish Christian heritage of the first Christians. It would make sense that they would need an earthly Jesus instead of a heavenly Jesus. So there you go, heathens! Originally, Jesus' birthday was celebrated on the Epiphany, which the Christians in the 1st century considered to be his actual birth, considering the Messiah inhabited Jesus' body. Whereas later on down the road, in about the 4th century, it was actually codified into Christianity that he was born on the December 25th. If you like this information on this subject, please hit the like button and consider subscribing. We also have a Patreon here if you would like to support us. Patreon.com, Godless Engineer. If you like this information, please don't forget to hit that like button. We'll be posting more of these videos throughout the month of December. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, and don't forget to stand up and use your voice. Bye, heathens.